So we're gonna look at 6.1 now. First we'll look at 6.1a. A and B are both very similar. A is a pretty short and simple lesson. It's mainly dealing with calculator stuff, where in this case we're evaluating radicals. Okay, and a radical is just this symbol, like your square root. We're only going to be dealing with square roots, but they can be other types as well, like cube roots and fourth roots and so on. But the ones we'll be dealing with is square roots. So remember, whenever we squared stuff in the past, like 3 squared, you're multiplying that times itself. So 3 times 3 would be 9. Well, this is when we're square rooting something, we're doing basically the opposite of that, and we're going backwards to put what the original base would have been. So like for the square root of 9, we're going to get, that has to be equaled out to 3. Okay, so it's just doing the opposite of what we had before, basically. So most of the ones for evaluating, you're not going to do much like math work to figure this out. You're going to use the calculator a lot because they just want you to get used to what the radical is doing. So there's a difference. Like for A, they're saying evaluating. For B, they're saying simplifying. So when we get to simplifying, you won't be able to use the calculator. You'll have to do it by hand. So for these, like they'll give you simple, straightforward ones like square root of 36. 6 times 6 is 36, meaning the square root of 36 is going to be 6. Now, again, the calculator can do that for you too, especially for these perfect squares. You would click on the square root button wherever you may have it. It'll look like this, or it may be on top of one of your buttons. The 36, it should give you 6. Okay, so you'll use the calculator mainly for that. Now, when we get into stuff that won't be a perfect square, like square root of 17, we're still in the evaluating section for part A, so again, you'll have to use a calculator. You'll just type that in, square root of 17. If you have my calculator, it gives you to use still like that because that's the simplified form, but if you press S to D, it'll change it to the decimal form of this because they're going to want decimals for this section. So the directions are going to tell you to round to the nearest hundredths place right here. So you only want 2 decimal places. You don't want to go past that. So if it's a 3, you're going to keep this the same as a 2. You're going to do 4.12. Okay, so remember, you use the third number, okay, to go back and see if you need to round up or down. 3 means if it's less than 5, you don't round up. If it's more than 5, then you would round up to, this would have been 4.13, but it stays the same. So that's pretty much the gist of all of these. Like, it doesn't necessarily matter what type you have. Like if you do a decimal of this, 0.0016, you can type that into the calculator. Again, just like it is, you would get 0.04. Okay, so this is what you're typing in. These are the answers. The only thing you may come across different, maybe like a fraction situation, like square root of 81 over 121. You can type that in the calculator. Most of them are going to give you perfect squares. So when you square a fraction or square root a fraction, just like when you were squaring it, you can square root the top and the bottom. So the square root of 81 is 9. 9 times 9 is 81. And the square root of 121 is 11. So that would end up being 9 over 11. Okay, so you just square root the top and the bottom. That would mostly give you perfect squares. So the only difference or big thing you have to remember is stuff with negatives. Whenever we have negatives underneath our square root, even if you try and type that in, like square root of negative 49, it's going to tell you some type of error, domain error. This one says math error, because we can't have a square root of negative 49. Whenever we're going to do like 7 squared, that's positive 49. And then when we do negative 7 squared, that's still positive 49. Negative 7 times negative is still going to be a positive. So none of these would end up working to get that negative 49. So this, you would have to put, there's a button that would say not a real number. So you would have to click on that button and you would say that this is not a real number. We won't have any cases or deal with anything that has that negative in it. Okay, you'll just say not a real number. Now don't get it confused with negatives that are going to be on the outside, like negative square root of 9. This one is on the outside, so we're taking the square root first. So the 9 is positive. So you can actually take the square root to be 3. So the square root of 9 is going to be of 3, but this negative is just going to drag on with it. Okay, so don't get those two confused with each other. Those can be different. Okay, and that's the gist of 6.1a.